I'm Greg Garbus of Four Season Tools. I'm going to talk about today is how to lay out the ground posts for a stationary high tunnel. Here at this site in southern Illinois, we're putting in a stationary 30 by 48 plant house and 3 movable V-track tunnels. We found that the ratio of 4 to 6 times the square footage of your heated transplant house to your unheated movables works well. So for the transplant house, what we did is we first started with site prep. We got everything leveled off really nice. We have a swale on the outside of both sidewalls. Then, once it was nice and flat, we put some weed fabric down, we staked that in place, and then on top of that, we put some gravel so that water can drain through it. So what we did is we need to decide where all the ground posts go. So we always start in the 4 corners. So, a surveyor came out, put pins in the ground next to these stakes. So what we did is we put a rebar tee into the ground, we put a string on it, and we ran that string from side to side. After we pounded it in, it didn't end up exactly where it was, so we put a second one in to make sure that the string ended going right over the survey pin to make sure that the string is perfectly in line with the sidewalls. We measured this sidewall to get the length properly correct. We measured the other sidewall to get the length correct. Then we measured our 2 diagonals from the pins. If the diagonals are the same, that means that the building is square. A 48-foot tunnel will have the 2 posts centered at 48 feet. Since the posts themselves are 2 3/8 inch, the outside to outside dimension of a fixed house that's 48 feet will actually be 48 feet 2 3/8 inches to account for the thickness of the hoop. So to not worry about that, what we do is we just care about the centers of the pipe. So the center of this pipe to the center of that pipe is going to be 48 feet. So what we did is, now that our string is perfectly aligned this, we started at that one pin, we spray painted a big X in the ground where the corner post goes. We measured 48 feet along the string right here, and we painted another big X. We tried to make that paint bigger than a foot, because what we're going to do is we're going to come in with an auger in the back of a tractor, and right at the center of that X, we're going to go down about 2 feet and auger out a hole. Then we'll take our ground post, we'll put it in, and we'll pound it the rest of the way in. That way it's still sturdy. We'll backfill that hole with concrete. So we're starting with the 4 corners. We'll dig the 4 corners out, and then we'll set the 4 corners, we'll pound the posts in, and we'll set them in concrete. Then we'll use our spacer boards, our templates, to get our 6-foot spacing. We'll use that and we'll measure, and we'll make sure that as we put the rest of the posts in the center, that those are perfectly 6-foot center to centers right along that sidewall string. What we're going to talk about right now is how to set posts in the ground for a stationary high tunnel. What we have here is a 30 by 48 foot stationary high tunnel. What we did was we marked out where the 4 corners were going to be, then we measured our diagonals to make sure it's going to be square. A 48-foot long high tunnel has all the posts at 6-foot centers. The posts themselves are 2 3/8 inch wide, meaning the total length of the building is going to be 48 feet 2 3/8 inches. The width of the building is going to be exactly 30 feet from outside to outside. Once we found the center point of all 4 corners, we went through, we ran a string from one corner to the other corner, and where all these rebar tees are in, we marked where the different posts are going to go. We moved the pebble out of the way, cut through the weed fabric so that we could auger holes in for the posts. These posts are going to go in 32 inches, so we put a mark 32 inches up from the bottom. This represents ground level. When we augered them out, there's a spray paint mark right here on the auger at 24 inches. We didn't go down all the way. That way we can pound the posts in, and these are going to get set in concrete. So over this side, we already have the 2 corner posts in. We put the corner post in, we put a ground stake driver in the top, we pounded that post in down to that line. We went over to the far corner where the ladder is right there, pounded that post in till we hit the line. Then we ran a string from one pipe to the other pipe, and using a line level, we ensured that they're both in the same amount. After these 2 corners are in, we're going to measure where the other 2 posts go, making sure we have that 30-foot length. Measure our corners to make sure that we're square, and make sure from the center of that pipe on that end to the center of the pipe on this end is exactly 48 feet. So the outside to outside dimension for the length is 48 feet 2 3/8 inches. What I want to show here is how to set the posts for a stationary high tunnel. What we have is a 30-foot wide by 48-foot long high tunnel. The 30-foot width goes from the outside of the post to the outside of the post, and for 48 feet of the length, it goes 6-foot center to centers, meaning the total length of the structure is 48 feet 2 3/8 inches, which is the thickness of the pipe. So when we set all the posts in, we first marked where the 4 corners were going to go, we measured the diagonals. If the two diagonals are the same, we know that it's square. We augured out the four corners for the posts, and then we started driving the posts into the ground. Every one of these posts, we marked a line on how deep they're going to go in the ground. For this configuration, they go 32 inches into the ground. So we augured out about 24 inches. We pounded it in the rest of the way. When we pounded it in, we used this ground stake driver, which is a big solid piece of metal. It goes inside the swage so that when you hit it with a sledgehammer, you're not affecting the swage of the end of the material. Then, once we had them close, but not all the way in, we ran strings to all four corners, and those strings we started right at the bottom of the swage to make sure that we're all of our posts are in the same plane. Using these line levels right here, we made sure that everything was perfectly flat. They were all in the same plane, and they were all in at the same depth. Now the four corners are in, we're going to go ahead and set all four corners into concrete. Then we'll come back after the four corner posts are exactly where we want them. We'll come back with the auger. We'll dig all the other posts in the middle. We'll use the spacer boards to ensure that we keep our 6-foot spacing. We're going to use the strings on the bottom and on the top to make sure that they are all in the same line. And then we'll pound them down so that the posts have the bottom of the swage lines right up with the line of the string. That way we ensure all four of our posts are where they need to be and they're square. All of our posts are 6 foot center to center, and all the posts are pounded in the same exact depth. We're here setting the post for a 30 by 48 foot stationary high tunnel. First thing we did is we found our four corners. Outside to outside is 30 feet for this tunnel, and then the length of the tunnel, since the posts are at 6 foot center to centers, the total length of the tunnel outside to outside is 48 feet plus the width of a pipe. Since the pipe is 2 3/8 inches, our outside to outside dimension along the length is 48 feet 2 3/8 inches. That makes life easy because we can go ahead and set them right at 6 feet. We started with our corner posts. Once we put our corner posts in the ground, we ran strings all around it in line levels to make sure they were all in at the same depth. We measured our diagonals to make sure that the whole building was square. After that was in, we ran 2 strings. The top string tells us how far to put the posts in. We measured it from the bottom of the swage, and then the bottom string told us where the outside of the tunnel is. Then we used these spacer boards to make sure that as we built the tunnel, that the spacing in between the hoops is exactly 6 feet. Now that all the posts are in, they're set into the ground, we're going to go over here and do the other side. We've already augured out all the holes. We've run all of our strings. We've laid the posts out right here. Now we're ready to put these in the ground. Once all the posts are in the right location, make sure all the posts are nice and plumb, and then we'll concrete all of them and set them in.